Okay, everybody, we're going to get this started here. Excuse me. And sorry, great way to get it started. But we've got a lot to cover today. Oh, sorry. And so yeah, we have trends that we do that I'll talk about. I've got a little bit of farmer research that we're going to share with you guys. But unique to this one, I'm joined here by Hank, our data scientist. He's going to talk a little bit about AI. So like I said, we have a lot that we want to get through. And I also want to talk a little bit about what's going on in the larger ag market. So we don't waste any time. This is being recorded. We'll send out a recording of this. Feel free to share it amongst your organization. And also new with this one, I've added a couple polling questions. I know from an AI standpoint and a tech standpoint, we've got questions. But also I think it would be nice with the participation from the audience so you get to see what other dealers are doing and maybe sentiment on a few of those questions. So first time we've done the polling questions, should be quick and easy if Zoom works with us. So anyways, I'm Andy Campbell, Director of Insights here at TractorZoom. And so I'll let Hank introduce himself and then we'll get kicked off.
So my name's Hank Mandsager. I'm the lead data scientist at TractorZoom, and I'll be talking all things AI, machine learning. Before I get into it, though, Andy's going to lead you through some market updates, so I'm going to hand it over to him.
Okay. Yep. And we're going to shift this over, and I'll take center stage before Hank joins us again. So along with this, obviously we've had some news here at TractorZoom. If you're familiar with it, we've been joined by the Anvil team and broaden what we can do to help dealers grow. And so I just wanted to share with everybody what our updated mission is, that we're really looking still within the data company to help people get to decisions faster. And our focus is narrowed down just to help our customers, dealers, lenders, anybody else to drive business growth. And so that's kind of the point that we're coming from. The data still derives from tractorzoom.com. So if you're a dealer not on listings, just reach out to us and we can help you get on that. And yeah, this is the marriage of the two companies, still under the TractorZoom overall brand. But like I said, we have a lot to get through today. So I want to hit on a little bit of research that sets the stage of why trends right now are especially important and how this, how the ecosystem might be changing on the farm, how that's going to translate into trends. And then we want to look forward, talk about just being innovative and what we are doing from an AI standpoint. And Hank is going to share a little bit about, what he's been working on, what the results are, and maybe what's pending for the future. And then speaking about the future, we're going to talk a little bit about what this ag economy looks like in the next 6 months, year, maybe 2 years, and how that might affect the equipment market. So kicking off with the farmer research, if you haven't yet read the Census of Agriculture, the government puts this out and they survey farmers every 5 years, and then they document how that has changed. So largely what has changed is consolidation of farms, and the big have gotten bigger. Now, a lot of that growth is due to the great farm economy that we've had in the last 3 years. Those revenues have just grown, but it also has allowed those farms to grow. And so that changes the kind of the ecosystem of the farms a little bit. There's less smaller farms, there's more bigger farms, and that creates an obvious challenge within being able to wash out some of that equipment, especially the larger pieces of equipment. And what this also does, though, is that larger section of farms is heavily aged. And so the group of farmers that are 65 plus have grown by 12% over the last 5 years. And then you can see here, this is something that Ernie Goss puts off at the Creighton University. And looking at that transfer of ownership that's going to happen it's already happening, but it's going to happen at even a faster pace here over the next 10 years. And my question really to the group is, what is the impact of this going to be to your dealership if you're out there? And so we'll see if I can leverage a poll right here. But so I'm going to launch a poll, and you can answer the first question. It might actually ask you to answer number 2 as well. Let's just try to answer number 1 here and see if this actually works. So if you're on there, you can just answer question number 1 right now. But the impact of farmer succession that's going to happen probably here in the next 10 years, we're curious to know what kind of impact that's going to have on your dealership. And I imagine it might fit and hit different size of dealers differently. But it's certainly something that's being talked a lot on the farmer side. I know for our farm in particular, we're going through succession planning right now of what will happen, but it's going to dice up the industry a little bit. So we're going to run this just for a few, get some feedback, and then I've got a little bit more research that we did here recently with a group of young farmers. So got a couple more coming in. Great participation rate, by the way. That's fantastic. And when I end this poll, I'm honestly not even sure if it's going to show you the results. So give this one more second here. We're getting 30 plus responses coming in. Okay. So just in case this doesn't share it back out with you, of 34 responses, one, just 3% is very negative. But a lion's share of it, almost 50%, is somewhat negative. So this is obviously something that people are, well, at least if you're not focused on, aware of, and aware that it needs to be planned for. On the kind of the neutral standpoint, 14% are little to no impact, and a third are somewhat positive. Nobody has clicked on the very positive piece. So we'll go and I'll see if I can launch that poll again once we get to the next opportunity. Okay. Just recently, I was down in Dallas and had the opportunity to talk with the founder of the Ag Barometer at Purdue. And when he was giving his presentation, he was talking about the likelihood to grow from farmers. So they survey about 400 farmers randomly across the United States every month and gauge kind of the health of the farm economy, but they always ask additional questions as well. And so what I did is I took the exact same question that he asked, because he stated in his presentation and in my conversation with him afterwards, he's like, this is likely an older sector. What did the young farmers think about? And so I'm going to get to that question and the results that I asked a group of young farmers here in Iowa. But first, just an update on what they're presenting out at Purdue. This was February's results. We're going to see this when we look through the equipment trends, but in general, Farm Capital Investment Index that they do, the likelihood to put down additional capital, whether it's for buildings, equipment, that's down. And it hasn't quite been this low consistently like this for some time. Now, they also dig into this a little bit and say, what are your biggest concerns going forward, and why might it be low, or if it is positive. And there's a lot of data points here, but the main thing that you really need to see is this, that the largest increase month over month of all these different factors of concerns for their operation is the higher input cost. That jumped almost 7% from 28 to 34 in the month from January to February. So obviously, it's something that's a higher concern. We're going to talk about interest rates later, but that's actually dropped down a little bit, even though it hasn't changed much. But it is the higher input cost, which obviously machinery owns a piece of that. And this was the question that they asked the farmers about: what is your growth expectations for your farm over the next 5 years? And I mapped this with what Purdue found across the nation. And then I had the opportunity to speak to a group of young farmers from the Farm Bureau Association here in Iowa. And I was able to reach over 100 responses from them. And I want to showcase the difference of these results. And again, this might inform a little bit from a marketing strategy of what you look at your dealership. But if you look at the Purdue Farmer Sentiment, almost 50% of them have either no plans to grow or reduce in size. So those are your first two graphs there in the lighter blue. When I asked this group of young farmers, you've got a lion's share that are extremely optimistic, maybe overly optimistic considering what's coming down the pipeline, but still optimistic in a growth sense. And so, again, there's a lot of things you might be able to draw from this, but one of them that we are seeing in the industry is a better relationship with those younger farmers, meeting them where they're at and staying connected with them. And then the second question that I was able to ask those young farmers, and again, thanks to Matt Rash from AgriVision for supplying this question to me. So I had the idea to ask, what's the most important thing that you consider when purchasing equipment? And again, I had just over 100 responses for this type of question, completely open-ended. So I had to categorize these. Price, number one, not surprising with what we've seen. But then number two was relationship, tied with condition, quality, history of the machine. So these really hit into three different tiers of the types of responses. So again, something insightful for your dealership, hopefully not completely new to what you've seen, but also obviously having an updated price, repricing strategy matters, but then so does a strong relationship with your farmer, not unlike what we just talked about with those young farmers out there. So I had a quick question here. What is the age used for young versus old producers? Great question there, Kevin. And the young farmers convention that I spoke at, that I interviewed all these people, I believe they had to be, they could not be older than, I think it was 40. Might have been 35, but yeah, I think it was 35 or 40. That was the cap of the oldest that they could be at that convention. And just gauging by the audience that I spoke with, my guess is an average of about 30. And then the Purdue Farmer Sentiment doesn't discriminate on age. It's just random. It's everybody. But knowing the distribution of farmers across America, I'm sure that average is well near 60. But good question. I should ask Purdue if they know that on their side. Okay, so I want to take a little bit of time and go through some trends. I will say right away that I went through combines, these three classes, a couple different classes or categories of tractors, sprayers, planters, round balers. There's a lot to the point where combines, especially, and sprayers, I have way more research than I can possibly share. So if I go a little fast, I apologize. But I'm also going to put together a few supplementary materials. A lot of those I'll put out on YouTube. We do some YouTube shorts now that are quick hitters. So if you haven't subscribed to our Tractor Zoom Pro YouTube channel, definitely do that, because then whenever I put out a quick hitter video, it'll just alert you and you can watch it and be on your way. So I'll get started here with combines though. And just to preface this, from combines, 7s have differed from 8s and 9s from a volume standpoint, the supply that's out there. And then that almost correlates directly with how hard they've been hit with essentially price reductions, looking at 23 to now in 24. Tried to do most things in a year-over-year basis here. Okay, so Class 7 combines, and if you've been on this webinar before, this is familiar to you, but I should at least take a quick second and explain what we're looking at here. That the blue graph across the bottom is the amount that gets added to dealerships. The orange is what pulls off of a dealership's lots. And then the corresponding difference gets added to a cumulative supply, and that's your teal in the background. And so we kind of normalize this based on all the different dealers and lots, locations that we work with. But that is this graph here. So Class 7 combines, the supply is down now year over year. Dealers have done a nice job of reducing that supply, and it's relatively staying down. And that correlates a lot with what we see in the overall price. So the list price we see continue to creep up just a little bit, modestly 5% higher now year over year. And then the auction price, which is on the bottom, this is quarterly average based on the hours given, 750 to 1,500 hours right here. That is up just slightly, but you also have some newer combines that are hitting the market right now. And so for each one of these classes, I believe I dove into one or two specific models, and not on the 7s, I will do it on the 8s. But with the 7s, what we're seeing here is, that the supply is down about 55%, and the overall price that we're seeing at auctions for specific models might be down maybe 5, possibly 10% on some that we're looking at. On the Class 8s, so the supply, again, this was a big focus all through 23 to reduce Class 8 supply. Then it continued to creep back up. It's been harder to keep this one down. And so the supply here is only down about 29% And the effect that has had on price is a little bit more significant, to where, again, list price continues to push up. It's been pulled back a little bit the last couple of quarters, but what we're seeing is the average combine, Class A combine, that's between 750 and 1,500 hours on the dealer lot, and those are machine hours, by the way, for this particular graph. It's down about 25%, really aggressively, especially this first quarter. And I know we're seeing a lot more of dealer auctions that are in the market trying to really reduce that supply. We saw quite a bit also in Q4. When I look specifically at models, the S780 is a good one to follow on this just because of the volume that's out there. I don't see as strong of a downward price pressure on anything that's less than 500 step hours. There's a little bit of pressure there, but not as much. It's really in the mix and on trend line with what we saw last year. It's when you start to get up there in age that, when you get to 3 to 5+ years, that downward pressure really is pushing hard down on those Class A combines. Again, 8250 is not as many of those in the auction market, but from a percent down for those older combines, I'm seeing about the same thing. This is equating to about a 10 to almost a 20% decrease in some of these prices year over year at auction. Now, moving to the Class 9 and 10s, again, 7s were able to reduce supply, 8s reduced it some, 9s, 10s, they did for a little while, and it's right back up there. But again, this isn't surprising considering you've got more of these, especially Class 10s, coming out of the market now where they weren't there before. So it's going to be a battle that some of the larger dealers that are selling these are going to be faced with. What has that done for supply? You've got a lot of mess over here in 22 and early 23. That's because there was 1 or 2 X9s that might have been sold, or there's just a few models that are really throwing off an average. But when you start to look now that we're getting a lot more of these consistently at auction, the dealer list price is pretty much flat, possibly down a little bit. And the auction price, again, is being hit similarly to what those Class 8s were. Now, I looked at S790s, and just to see, model to model specifically, how is this comparing with last year? So what we have here in 2023, the green dots, good amount of volume out there to compare against. Not a lot of these sold so far in 24, but you can see that you're right in the mix and about on trend line, possibly even a little bit above trend line for very new models. So there's still some residual farmer cash out there that's willing to pay for a good machine that they want. And it just weakens a little bit as you age with that. So again, if it's a solid machine, you've got farmers that have the cash available, but it is weakening within combines. Okay, so for row crop tractors, then I've looked at slightly smaller row crop tractors, 175 to 299 horse, and then I looked again 300 to a 425 category. But for this slightly smaller row crop tractor, again, supply it rose a little bit last year, but really the demand has been decent enough to keep the overall supply in check. And so that's allowed those list prices to increase 5% relatively consistently. And then the auction, even though we've seen some fluctuation with it, it's down just slightly. So from what I've seen with a lot of these, and I've got, I think, a Magnum 280 here that I've analyzed, that I've seen prices be flat compared to last year to a plus or minus 5%, depending on the model that you're looking at. So these Magnum 280s are really holding their weight fairly well so far this year. Just kind of goes to show the resilience that you see within the row crop tractor market. 300 to 425 horsepower and supply on these guys have been a bear. Anybody with 8Rs out there knows that. And so up 40%. And what has that done for the price that I don't know if my picture up here, 9% increase in the dealer side. So really that's, a consistent from the year prior of a price increase that we're seeing from the OEMs. And again, I know that the margins are getting a little tighter on the dealership side across the board for different pieces of equipment, but we're still seeing a strong price increase on these lists. And, even despite the higher supply, still a pretty strong resilience in the demand for these large row crop tractors. So looking at this version of the Magnum here, this 340. Again, there haven't been a lot of sales yet in 24. There's been essentially one each month, but right in line, if not just slightly softer than what we saw in 23. Still significantly higher than what we experienced pre-21 though. And then with the 8R 340, again, not as many of these in a newer model. These are weakening a little bit from what I've seen, but again, the 8R 340s are one of the problem childs of the market right now. And so just that oversupply is, filling the demand that's out there. And so I think that is dropping the price here a little bit. From some of the 8Rs that I've looked at, I've seen maybe a 5 to a 10% reduction in some of their prices that they've hit at auction. Okay, so self-propelled sprayers. Check time, make sure I don't cut Hank out here. But with the self-propelled sprayers, I'll say it again. When I was going through this one, there was so much nuance within the data that I had to really pull a lot of the analysis to the side. And I'm going to just have to do a whole nother video series or a paper that we'll post on our site. So if you want one of those, or if you have questions specifically about self-propelled sprayers right now, let me know because I'm diving into the data as soon as this webinar is done. So what we've seen with these self-propelled sprayers, the volume has grown. Last year, it was a little bit later to the scene than the row crop tractors and certainly later than the combines were. And a lot of dealers have been working to get that down. Some were very proactive, maybe at auctioning those starting in October, November, December. And we're still seeing some of these go to auction from dealerships here in 24. But the overall supply hasn't dropped below what it was this time last year. And so what has that done for prices? So for this one in particular, the R4045, this is something, I wrote a blog article on this if you've read it on TractorZoomPro.com, but really seeing like a bifurcation in how this market reacts. That again, those farmers that had a lot of carryover cash from last year, it appears that they're able to pay top dollar for sprayers that are under 2,000 hours. And so a lot of these are above or right at trend line from 2023 values. It's when you get to an older sprayer, one that's got plenty of usage, a lot of co-op sprayers that are hitting the market, then that's when prices soften a little bit, demand softens. These 3 points right here, I just added those yesterday. They're all from an auction just last weekend. And so with this one, I'll update it periodically. And what I noticed is the most recent data points that I put in for this model have all dropped significantly below the price trend line. Again, only 3 points from last weekend, but they're all about 10 to 15% below the current trend line. And I should note in this one, especially if you're just listening and not watching, these are 45s. Down here, I've got the filters of 1,200 gallon sprayers, 120 foot boom. So a bit on the larger side. And so I've got a bit of a nuance in here, and I wanted to show this because this is, again, when I saw this, I knew that there was more to unpack and uncover. So looking just at sprayers above $10,000 takes out some of the spray coops that are out there. And then looking for lower hourage sprayers that 0 to 1,500 before mine needs some major repair, and seeing a 75% price increase in auction year over year just is not entirely accurate. And this is where I started to notice the age of the sprayer and getting down to the details is going to be extremely important when doing comps in 2024. That the just getting as close to the comparable as you possibly can, because I'm starting to see even a bigger spread between the age of a sprayer that's out there, and possibly it's because of the technology it's on there or the potential repair bill. I'm just seeing a larger gap in those differences right now. But like we said, I don't want to forget this. The dealership list price is still up 13% year over year. And so a lot of that price drag from the OEM is being carried through, because I know they have gone up significantly in value here recently for new. Now so when I was diving into this this is just a quick look at probably what some of the analysis will look like when I dive into these deeper. This by 500 hour buckets. So anything from 0 to 500, how much is it worth? And then from 500 to 1,000, how much is it worth? And what is the average of hours within that I looked all the way back to 2020, and I thought this was interesting. It tells the story of what the self-propelled sprayer market has been doing. Then in 2020, you've got a relatively typical depreciation curve here. And then you move into 21, and shortages and great profitability create inflation. And so you got people doing a mad grab at those low-hour sprayers, and that created just those crazy auction prices. But those eventually ran out. And so what you had in 22 is some people moved on down and said, oh, I'll take a 500 or 1,000 hour sprayer and pay crazy prices for those. And so you can see that behavior start to happen here, and still pushing the average price of all of these older sprayers up based on that 2020 trend line and move. You get into 23, and the size of the bubble is the number of sprayers that we recorded on the market. So you don't have as much here in the 0 to 500. That makes sense. Still strong demand in 500 to 1,000, and decent demand from 1,000 to 2,000. Everything else starts to really average out. You move into 24. Now, again, we only have 2.5 months worth of data into 24. This little dot up here, just a few sprayers have really moved that up there, but this is really indicative of like the 410R. John Deere's newer sprayers and a few of the others that are extremely high priced are starting to hit the auction market and then really change that. But this is also a difference here between, I believe this one averaged, these three averaged at like 180 hours, where these are averaging around a 325 hours. And so they're essentially half the amount of hours, just a very steep depreciation curve for those very new sprayers. But over here, I think is the better part of the story of greater than 2,000 hours. You're starting to see a weakening, if not just parity in the market, and then a little bit of strength still in that 1 to 2,000 hour mark. Then I don't know if it can entirely last, but they've held on relatively well for now. But again, nuances make a difference. And so you can see here 500 to 1,000 hours that set of sprayers just did not perform very well. And talking with dealers that have had to take things to auction, they're seeing that a little bit, that it's been a little difficult to pinpoint exactly what price they'll get at auction. And a few of these that we've just covered here, similar to what I showed you earlier with the 4045, that younger ones, lower hour ones do relatively well. Once you get a little bit older, you start to get a little bit below trend line or at. And then the 4038s covered a lot of those, a little bit older on that as well. But again, like we saw in that big bubble graph, you're really fitting in with the past couple of years. So hitting a more normal depreciation there. And same sprayer here, but I just updated the analysis. And what really has happened, I'll go back between February and March, what you see is just a lot more sprayers sold below 2,500 hours, and how well they've actually done. And so this fits a little bit with the narrative we talked about earlier, is people that are after those lower hour sprayers have a little bit more of that disposable cash. They're still chasing some of those machines and aren't as price sensitive as everything else that's kind of hitting the typical depreciation curve there. And very few of these to actually make a determination on, but this is where some of that softening is coming from based on 22 values. There weren't that many 23s because nobody wanted to sell them then. But seeing things drop about 10% in a few of the 410R sales. Okay, real quick, I've got just the baler market that I'm hit on because it's always super exciting. And then I'm going to let Hank take over. But really, within the large baler market, supply is down slightly. And this is really driven, I think, more from the overall just forage market tied in with the beef cattle market, tied in with the drought, and just having the reduction of overall cattle herds. Cattle are profitable, but not if you can't feed them. And so I think this is just to fit the market demand, and it's a very stagnant and steady market. And so what I've been seeing with this particular model of John Deere balers, that they're fitting right in with trend line. And so we're not seeing a big difference. And I mapped this across the number of bales that they've been produced. And so when you look at that, everything is fitting pretty tightly with historical numbers. So anyways, I've talked enough. I'm going to let Hank join back here into the screen, and I'm going to step out a little bit while he talks a little bit about Tractor Zoom and AI.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to be here with you guys. I know that was a lot of information on the market. So what I want to talk to with you is about AI, is about what we're doing at TractorZoom. So if you're a TractorZoom Pro customer right now, today you're going to see in your portal that we've rolled out a new solution called TractorZoom AI. So TractorZoom AI, or TZ AI, is not necessarily a new solution in a broad sense of the term, but really what we're doing is we're consolidating all of our AI, machine learning, data science into one space. That really will allow us to be able to apply our design philosophy across all of our projects. So at TractorZoom, we have, probably a different design philosophy when it comes to AI than what you typically see in the market. What we do is we really center the user and their problems in all of our solutions. So we're not as worried about the technology or the algorithms that underlie the AI that we're using. What we care more about is driving value for you and meeting you where you are and delivering AI in your processes and in your current workflows. So we're hyper focused on those practical, value-driven solutions. But really, more importantly, what we want to do with TZ AI is provide you that single pane of glass where you can look at how we're using your data and opt into products. So transparency is the cornerstone of what we do at TractorZoom. And TZ AI gives us that framework in which you can opt in to allowing us to use your data in order to deliver these AI solutions for you. So what I want to do today is really walk you through one of our new features called Smart Descriptions and show you how we turned AI, artificial intelligence, and turned it into actionable insights. So many of you probably know this pane, but this is a typical listing here on TractorZoom for an S780. And in that description is probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of features on that machine. And so maybe you have had to review a listing before it goes out and on the internet for marketing purposes, or maybe you reviewed listings to understand exactly what features are on equipment in order to value it. Here at TractorZoom, we want to understand every feature on every piece of equipment to understand what really drives value in the market. But obviously, when you have descriptions that look like this, it can be pretty difficult. So what we did is we actually ran an experiment. And we had a team go out and review these descriptions and say, okay, how long does it take us to pull all the useful information out of the description into a format that we can then use in our product? And so after we ran our experiment, we found it took between 20 and maybe even up to 30 minutes, depending on the machine, to pull all that useful information out and then do a quality check on it. So that's not terrible if you're only looking at one or two pieces of equipment. But in our database, there are over 1 million lots. So obviously, doing this by hand is not something that's really feasible. And that's where AI really can come in and help us out. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to leverage AI, take all of this information and provide something useful for us in the end. But because we approach things from looking at the user, we really asked the question of what does the user gain from being able to do this? And so there's two main things within TractorZoom Pro that we wanted to enable for our users. One, we wanted to make sure that they are filtering to the highest value features, and we weren't missing any that drive the overall value of the equipment. But also, two, when we provide comparables, those comparables are driven by the most critical features. So the way we did this is we created a generative AI solution that turned that long blob of text on the left into something what we see on the right. So on the right, everything is broken out into a nice digestible format that either humans can read or even machines. So really the process here at TractorZoom is based in engineering. So what we do is we look at an iterative approach. We say, what's the simplest thing that we can go solve today? We learn from that and we build upon it. So we started with very simple models, just saying, hey, can you just pull out useful information? Then we said, okay, now I want to know more. How much information can you pull out? How accurate are these models actually? And then continuing to iterate from there. So really the goal here is to say, hey, we've got this whole blob of what we call unstructured data, and we wanted to turn that into structured data. From a big picture, what you guys might have at your dealership or in your institution, text represents a huge source of value that really is untapped because it's so difficult to work with. That's what we call unstructured data. Here at TractorZoom, we're really using AI to leverage the value in that unstructured data by transforming it into something that's more useful. But even then, as a user, what's on the right's not particularly useful to you. Even though we can make this a more digestible format, it's not really meeting you where you're at with your processes. So what we've done is we've integrated all this data into TractorZoom Pro so that when you filter, when you do match search, or when you look at comparables, all of this data is feeding into those algorithms to give you better, higher quality comparables and have you better understanding of all the features that are on equipment. So Andy's going to take you guys through exactly another maybe use case as we dive deeper into some of this data where we say, okay, we bring it into the product, but also can these new insights drive what Andy's doing when looking at the marketplace. So he's going to walk you through the planter market and show another use case where we can say, hey, we've got all of these great descriptions. What does this mean in terms of the total market?
Yep. Good. And that also reminded me that we're going to relaunch that poll. Actually, tell you what I'll do. On the poll, so a few people answer this, and we'll send this in a survey out afterwards, so you can see all the results. It's actually good that you guys were proactive here, and we talked a little bit about AI. So actually, I'm going to share the results that we have right now. And so with this, the question number 2 that talks particularly about AI, of how likely your dealership is to leverage AI in some aspect of your business in the next 6 months. I've got decent sized bell curve, but it looks like a majority of the people are sitting in that kind of number 2 where it's intriguing, but to do so would be an uphill climb. And so I'll put a quick plug in for Hank that he just presented down at a conference on, what we're doing here within AI, but also how you guys can leverage it yourself. Obviously you can give us a call and an email and we can have a discussion on how you can use it within TractorZoom Pro, but also if you've got another idea on how you might be able to leverage that. And I know it's been recorded and we've got the video being processed now. So we'll send out a link so you can watch that. And there's some things that you can start doing tomorrow that leverage AI. So it's not as big of an uphill climb as you might think, but it sounds good because it looks like a lot of people are at least discussing it. And then the other question is the biggest roadblocks that we see. Again, I'll send out another survey so you can answer this maybe in incomplete if you didn't get a chance to get through all these questions. But it looks like culture, expertise, skill set, or maybe data quality. A lot of them, technology is actually the low score on impediments. So impediments might be just across the board, but we've also talked about that in terms of what might slow down adoption of AI. So anyways, Hank had mentioned on the planner side, and then really when he had the idea of doing this, it came from discussions that we had, but also I know we went to the Moving Iron Summit this past year, and this was a huge topic on one of the final days of what about pucks? You've got all these potential upgrade kits. How are you going to value them? Where can you possibly get the data? Because it's just not standardized. It's not structured. And then, so here's an obvious potential use case for doing this. And I will state right now, like we're running things just last night. And so this isn't entirely done, but you can get an idea of what this might look like. So when talking about the planter market here, quick, first, I'll hit on a couple of things. The supply, I know talking with some dealers that there's planters might be a concern right now from an oversupply issue. They're up just slightly, but this right now graph contains all planters. And so I know that the size of planter and the risk that it provides to your dealership is totally different if you're talking about a $300,000 planter versus a 3-point hitch one that might just be worth 30. And so details matter on this, but supply is up. And I know it's a little bit of a concern of, what are the prices doing with these? With the data that Hank's been able to provide, I was able to really quickly say, okay, I'm interested in the 1775 NT. I want to know this by year, and electric drive matters, hydraulic downforce. Essentially, I want to know, is this precision capable? Can it be high speed? And and how well, are these 24 values comparing with everything else. And of all the data points, again, for the 1775 NT that's sold so far and 24, we've got 5 of the sales that have been below historic trend line, but they're still within the realm of kind of the possibility of what we've seen in 23. Those are the orange dots there. And so while the market does seem to be obviously a little bit weaker, along with a lot of other pieces of equipment, it's not, I wouldn't say it's definitively turned yet, but each planter is different. And I know each region is highly varied based on if you're smaller fields in the East Coast and you need to have more precision capabilities going around all the turns in the trees. So what does this actually look like? And so I'll show you what I have up here first, and then we'll go into planters really quick. But, compacts are something else that we've talked about too, with just a loader bucket, an excavator, a backhoe side on a belly mower. That's really just going to change the value of, a compact tractor a ton. And so it's a pain in the butt to go and revalue all of these just because you might have too many of them sitting on your lot. So how can you do that quicker and with precision? If you're using our search, what we have down here is smart field descriptions. And so all it does, it looks just like this, little line here at the bottom, hit the down arrow. And now all of a sudden, because of the smart stuff that Hank just talked about, it's pulled that in and it's put it within data fields. So you can say, okay, I'm interested in something with a loader, which auctioneers may or may not have included. Do I want to grapple? What about just pallet forks, snow blowers in certain areas? And so those you can just check mark to see, does it have it, does it not? But it can even read down to the tire type, the hydraulic pump, and the gallons per minute that it's capable of doing, the PTO size, which may not be relevant on a 1025 as much as it might be on a mid-range row crop tractor, and then the transmission. Again, that can really make a huge difference on a lot of the different tractors we look at. And so on, being able to click between the transmissions and have it quickly filterable can save you a lot of time and just help you get to a more accurate answer right away. So let's just look at, let's go 1775 NT since it's there. And I'm just going to give you a quick idea because we could spend, again, a whole nother webinar going into all of this. But regular auction average is 157 for these, but with these smart field descriptions, now you can go down in here and say, okay, bulk fill, yeah, but other ones, let's say hydraulic down pressure. Let's say if you're interested in that, now all of a sudden you see that significant difference it does on the average, which makes sense, but it's now not requiring you to go read through a bunch of descriptions or do one search and then compare it with another search. Again, drive type. Looking at electric, narrowing it down even further for what it is that you're after. And from there, doing the analysis on the individual pieces, that gets just a whole lot easier to find the comparables you're after. And then whether you're after trends or potential trades. So anyways, I just wanted to show that a little bit about what this actually looks like, because the AI stuff is great. But like Hank said, it's the stuff on the right that might be useful, might not, but you want it to be actionable. And so this is what we're working on right now. And correct me if I'm wrong, this will be turned on soon for all TZP users, right?
Yep. So at about noon today, this will be turned on. If you're a TZ Pro user, you'll have this available in search, both filter and match, as well as you'd have this in your inventory. If you're a financial customer, this won't impact your comparables on the equipment list side. But for dealers, this will be available to you guys within your inventory.
Okay, very good. So you guys probably, know it first here before it really goes out. So noon today. Anyways, okay, let me jump back over to this. And one thing that I found when using the smart description, I found one that got filtered out, but these were two different planters, 1775 NTs. They were both 1 year old, difference on the price. And when I really looked through the pictures, I didn't see a whole lot of difference. But if you ever want to talk to your sales team or anybody on your team in terms of the importance of a description, here's the importance of a description. this was the auction price for this particular planter. This was the auction price for this one. And like I said, this may or may not have all this, these attachments. It looked like a pretty good planter and just a stark difference on the price. So I wanted to share that. You can pass that along, tell people to write out descriptions. Okay, really quick now, I want to leave this with looking forward. We've got an innovative look forward with AI and the potential that it's got there. And then also what might we expect here within 6, 12 months, possibly even 2 years in terms of the overall ag market. Just a high level overview. So talk about international markets a little bit, but then domestic, and it'll be apparent why I'm talking domestic at the end. But in terms of Ukraine, don't know if you've seen the news or not, but their ag minister has come out and said that they're likely going to reduce corn planting intentions by about 30%, which would be significant. They're also going to reduce wheat intentions, but I think Russia's probably going to more than make up for that on wheat. They've been producing a ton and dumping it on the market. The EU just came out this morning and said they're going to add some tariffs onto Ukrainian grain. So the overall effect in that is potentially positive for our domestic prices, but a lot of that is kind of already baked in with the market. So then you move over to Panama. And Panama, if you're following it, has had horrible weather, really dry, and so their lakes are low and they can't use the Panama Canal fully. So what that equates to is this was last year in January of soybean cargo ships and their current position on that date. And so obviously we shoot a lot down the Gulf of Mexico and over to China, #1 exporter. We don't right now. The cost is too high. You have to have a lighter load going through there, and it's backed up like crazy. So we have to send it around the Horn of Africa, essentially raising our costs significantly to delivery. And so it just makes us less competitive on the overall global market. So that's a big negative. Now, again, they might get rain replenished. I know we're going from an El Nino to a La Nina here this summer, and that'll change some patterns, but it is still pretty significant. And so that's something, that your farmers are watching. China, from China's standpoint, they've stated they want to buy a lot less from us, and they have been, with probably the exception of your small grains, your sorghum and barley. They buy a lot of that for particular drinks that they use over there. But from the large grain standpoint, that the corn is up just slightly, a little bit, but really China is becoming less and less of a market, and they're choosing to buy from Brazil. But whether politically they want to or not, Brazil is just a much cheaper option for them right now, with Panama considered and the great production that they've had out of Brazil and the not so great relations that we've got with China right now. So that just puts quite a bit of a downward pressure, and soybeans make a huge difference when we're talking with China. And then finally, we get to Brazil. When you're talking international markets, these are the big movers and shakers. And just an update on where Brazil is at right now. The soy harvest that's come out of Brazil, there's a huge difference between what the USDA said they project and what CONAB, Brazil's USDA, projects, but there's a lot of independents that even think it's below CONAB. And so that could be a potential short-term market swing, that this is more likely, the 146, 145 million metric tons is more likely to actually happen in USDA's slow roll on this thing. But that difference is the equivalent of our national carryout every single year. It's not insignificant, but it still probably won't move the needle more than maybe 30 to 50 cents on the soybean market. And it's still going to be suppressed going forward. They're into corn planting, almost entirely done with corn planting right now. They've got projected rains this weekend. They should be set up fairly well within corn planting. And so Brazil, in a big snapshot, put so many more acres into production the last few years, and they're getting better in terms of yield. So outside of a weather anomaly, they're going to be a stiff competitor for us in the foreseeable future. So then that means we need to rely a little bit more domestically. So the reason why I bring this up is when you're looking at farmers and they're, strategically, when you're talking 1 to 2 years out, pay a lot more attention to what we can do domestically in terms of consumption and driving demand. Right now, the overall net farm income is projected to be incredibly low. I think most people have seen this. So why? You got the domestic or the international market that we just talked about. Interest rates, I believe they're meeting later today. They probably won't drop them. But like we saw in the Purdue study, that interest rates are less of a concern for farmers right now. I think it's probably a given that we're going to reduce them maybe 3 times, probably just 2 the rest of this year, 1/4 point each time. But again, it's not probably going to be enough to move the needle significantly in terms of a farmer deciding to buy equipment or not. So then we talk markets and weather. With the markets in particular, we're coming off of the bottom of an incredible short period of short holdings from the money managers. So corn still is in almost a record low position in terms of people that are bearish on this market. So while we are getting a rebound, we are still at the bottom. So that's not boding well. And then when you look at soybeans, a bit of a rebound, but way at the bottom. And so a lot of people are betting against their commodities right now. Our strong dollar doesn't help on the export side either. So it's got to come internally in order to really reverse this thing around. And when you look what could potentially happen if the middle, essentially a couple of these I states here, if they don't get moisture replenished, that could hurt the corn and soybean crop this next year and boost commodity markets, but it's going to reduce their overall production. And so you give up one to get another. And so that could hurt in those particular regions. Could help if you're outside of those regions for farm profitability. And then so what we watch is the weather going from an El Nino now to a La Nina. It's going to happen about April at the earliest, probably June at the latest. And so what that essentially equates to, depending on what you're planting, rice and wheat will get in ground faster. It's going to hurt rice, 340 bushels or pounds to the acre. Wheat, expect a little bit of a boost. Corn, it's not going to affect planting a whole lot, but possibly it boosts corn a little bit, 5 to 8 bushels an acre, and then soybeans probably negligible on that. And so that's what to maybe expect with these change in weather patterns this particular year. And then it all just gets down to domestic use and renewable fuels. That's where our growth has come out of the past decade, 2 decades. And so again, if you're looking long-term, renewable fuels is where to pay attention to on the growth of the ag economy here in the U.S. So the planning intention report will come out March 28th. Pay attention to that when the USDA releases that, hoping that we don't overplant corn, because that would be bad. We're already contending with almost $4 corn, might be sub $4 if they overplant. But we should be down around 90 to 91 million acres, hopefully. So, in summary, what we saw in 23 was a large cash carryover that buoyed the markets at the end of 23 and helped some values early here in 24. But most of the equipment is trending down. I'd say if you're looking at equipment, combines are headed that way the fastest right now, especially those 8s and 9s. Sprayers, like I said, we're going to do more analysis. So reach out to me if you have questions on the sprayers, or be watching for when we put out that special analysis. And then tractors are surprisingly resilient right now, which maybe shouldn't be a surprise considering their utility and non-seasonality. And then really looking forward, just a shifting global marketplace. Brazil's better right now. It's going to be tough to compete with them internationally. And so we need to look at renewables or weather patterns that could change our production on the domestic side. So a lot that we covered. And like I said, there's even more in the analysis piece. As always, if you've got questions on anything that we covered here, feel free to always shoot me an email. And I thank you guys for taking the poll. If you've got any other kind of questions, especially anything that's AI related, let me know. I can connect you with Hank. Some of the best products that we produced and the cool innovations that we're working on were ideas that we've come up in conjunction with our partners. And so if you've got an idea like, can AI do this, or is it even possible? We'd love to hear it. And then we can brainstorm over it and see what's potentially possible out there. Because, now that we've working with Anvil, we've just got a really strong team of some smart individuals here that love working with our dealer partners out there. And we love to innovate together. So anything else to add, Hank?
I can add to that and say Smart Descriptions was built entirely off feedback from customers. So what we build is purely feedback from you guys. So we love to hear from you. Contact me directly, talk with Andy, and we're always there to listen to feedback, or if you guys have any problems that you think we can help solve.
Okay, good. Are there any questions? I think we've got a few minutes here that we'll stick around if you guys have any questions. But if not, then we can let you guys go. And if you want to ask any questions, we can take them offline too, and do it that way. So we'll hang out here for just a couple seconds. But other than that, then we can call it. And if you do happen to get a survey, like I said, the poll kind of worked. I set up a survey on the side too, so you might automatically get that one emailed out to you. Feel free to take that. We'll share out the results in a post when we send out the recording for this webinar. Okay, looks like we're good on questions. So appreciate everybody's time and take care until next time.